Hello, YouTubers. Hello, world. Excellent article about the convicted stalker in The Guardian this morning. And under the fair use, fair dealings guidelines, I'd like to read you an excerpt from that article. If you want to see the full article, you can read it on the Guardian's website, or it's now in the public domain. I've seen it posted on Facebook. So you can go look for it and you can find it. It contains some very powerful and very impactful information. So please, if you can, try and watch until the end of the video. This is the Guardian's article. When Alex Belfield was sent to prison for 5.5 years last month for online stalking, his accusers cried with relief. Finally, respite for what some had been a decade of near constant abuse. No more waking up in the middle of the night filled with dread about what he might have said about them to his 373,000 YouTube subscribers, or in bitter emails to their bosses or clients. For the TV presenter Jeremy Vine, the most high-profile target of arguably Britain's most prolific troll, it would be the first time in several years that he could host a live phone-in without worrying that one of Belfield's acolytes would hijack the programme to confront him with Belfield's lies. The relief was temporary. Within hours, a video appeared on Belfield's secret video channel, accessible to anyone willing to pay him £1 a week. If you are watching this, I have been sent to jail, intoned Belfield in his Steve Wright meets Alan Partridge boom, standing in front of a skew with Union Jack in the living room of his Nottingham home, wearing one of his trademark jazzy shirts. For just over 3 minutes, the 42-year-old delivered a monologue in which he said he was in prison for simply defending himself. All he had done, he suggested, was challenge people who had said things I believed to be untrue. He had never gone near anyone, he insisted, and was not accused of threatening any violence. Belfield compared his treatment with that of a police officer who had escaped jail despite being convicted of possessing child abuse images. I'm clearly of more risk to this country than a man who was attracted to children, he deadpanned. He ended with one of his catchphrases, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it, before making what to his victims was a sinister promise. We will be back. It was classic Belfield, sanctimonious, petulant and remorseless, taking elements of fact and twisting them to suit his own purposes, whilst belittling his targets and monetising these distortions even as he sat in a prison cell. The royal we was a frequent Belfield affectation, designed to give the impression that he sat atop of an anti-woke multimedia empire in the Alex Jones InfoWars mould. In court, he claimed to have 9 employees, but who they are remains a mystery. When not filming himself, he would address his camera operator as Tarquin. He would invite viewers to send in fan mail, not to any registered office, but to his local pub, whose landlady he described as his receptionist. To those who had been monitoring Belfield's output for the past few years, it was no surprise that he wanted the final word. This was a man who had not only eschewed lawyers to represent himself in court, but who had reported on his own trial each night online. A man who, even after being found guilty, appeared on stage in Blackpool with controversial right-wing commentator Katie Hopkins playing up his role as the stalker as he awaited sentence. The morning of his sentencing, Belfield had sat silent in the dock at Nottingham Crown Court as barrister David Aubrey, King's Counsel, finally mitigated on his behalf. Belfield, a former BBC radio presenter turned YouTube free speech advocate, was deeply sorry for the hurt he had caused, said Aubrey, after Belfield was convicted of stalking Vine and 3 other men online. It didn't work. Judge Saini jailed Belfield for 5 years and 26 weeks, accusing him of having weaponized the internet to haunt his targets. Online stalkers like you have the ability to recruit an army of followers whose conduct massively expands the effect of your stalking. That is why I say your stalking is in many respects more serious than a conventional stalker, the judge said. 4 women, past and previous BBC DJs and executives, had also accused Belfield of stalking them via email and social media. But the jury found him not guilty on those charges. Regardless, the judge clearly considered him a threat. Each of them suffered a campaign of harassment by email and social media communications. Each of them suffered serious mental health problems arising from Mr. Belfield's conduct, he said, imposing indefinite restraining orders preventing Belfield from contacting the women. The 8 complainants hope to never hear from their tormentor again, only to discover that he had arranged for that one final defiant video to go live after the judge sent him down, goading them from beyond his prison walls. Within days, 15,000 people had signed a Free Alex Belfield petition, and Hopkins was on Instagram mocking Belfield's targets for whining about simple, hurty words. Would they ever truly be able to escape the man Vine described as an Olympic-level stalker? How a failed local radio DJ with Timmy Mallett's dress sense ended up making potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds broadcasting lies about his largely obscure enemies is a story that begins in 2010. That's when Rosina Breen, then the managing editor of BBC Radio Leeds, decided to take what she thought was a calculated chance. She was looking for a new presenter to liven up the mid-morning show and thought Belfield, who was working for BBC Hereford and Worcester, was the man for the job. It was a risk. Belfield came with certain baggage, not least an Ofcom reprimand 4 years earlier, after he had referred to a pregnant teenager on Capital Gold as a dirty little slapper and a dirty little tart. But Breen thought he would bring personality to the station. A few months in, alarm bells started to ring, remembers Liz Green, who presented the lunchtime show that followed Belfield's each day. First, Belfield bawled out the station's beloved gardening correspondent for a perceived act of insubordination, prompting a surge of listener complaints. Then, during a broadcast at Leeds Playhouse, he asked an elderly lady what colour knickers she was wearing, resulting in the theatre boycotting the station. One day, Green says she found a talented young producer crying in the toilets after being shouted at by Belfield. Liz Green stands by her description of Belfield, but came to regret making an enemy of someone who turned out to be a Herculean grudge holder. 10 months into the job, Belfield pushed his luck too far in an innuendo-laden chat with the station's weather presenter. Despite later coming out as a member of the LGBT community when defending himself against allegations of homophobia in his trial, Belfield attempted to project an image of rampant heterosexuality for much of his life, with frequent references to breasticles and the current or future Mrs. Belfield. Breen sacked him on the spot, but agreed to honour the last 2 months of his contract. Soon, she terminated it altogether after he tweeted something that suggested, albeit in veiled terms, that Green should be sent to Auschwitz after his rival presenter fronted a highly praised documentary about the concentration camp. Another BBC radio presenter, a transgender woman called Stephanie Hurst, became Belfield's next target after refusing him an interview after her transition. She suffered years of what the judge described as transphobic and hateful comments, motivated in part, at least, by feelings of jealousy as to her success when his own career within the BBC had foundered. One of the BBC targets was Bernie Keith, a veteran presenter at BBC Radio Northampton, who was once Belfield's friend. Apparently, jealous that Keith's BBC career carried on whilst his own was stymied, Belfield set about trying to ruin Keith's life using his usual weapons of YouTube, Twitter and emails. It was a 9-year obsession, which saw him make what the judge described as the false and scandalous accusations. The effect on Bernie Keith's life was profound. He told the jury he was seconds away from killing himself. Sentencing Belfield, the judge said he had made this highly successful and confident radio presenter lose all joy in life and turned him into a shell. He was terrified of you. So scared was Keith that he gave neighbours a copy of Belfield's photograph in case he decided to take his campaign and harassment offline. Keith tried in vain to get YouTube to remove all of the libelous videos, even turning up at the social network's HQ to beg it in person. Belfield's final BBC target was Jeremy Vine, who made the mistake of responding after learning that Belfield had called him and fellow broadcaster Victoria Derbyshire the C word online. He soon made it to the top of Belfield's hit list, featuring regularly as a hate figure in his videos and social media posts. Giving evidence in court, Vine said, "I have in the past had a physical stalker who followed me. That is a picnic compared to this guy. It's like an avalanche of hatred that you get hit by." Vine didn't think he had ever met Belfield, but another former BBC radio presenter, James Hazel, remembers Vine delivering a masterclass to local BBC presenters in 2010. Belfield clearly resented being there, recalls Hazel. He was sulking and had a face like thunder. He hated being told how to improve by Jeremy. And that's where I think it all started. Hazel is one of the numerous others who now say Belfield trolled them. In October 2020, Belfield spread a false rumour that he was having an affair with a fellow BBC radio presenter, using it as part of his ongoing campaign against the national broadcaster. Presenter Ian Lee has since come out to say Belfield targeted him for many years, but that he was too frightened to go to court and give evidence. Some believe he relied on others as media monitors and had sources within the BBC itself. He seemed to know everything discussed on each of their radio shows every day, along with a number of internal matters. After being sacked from BBC Radio Leeds, Belfield had moved back to live with his mother in Nottinghamshire and found it difficult to get regular radio work. He started his own online show, Celebrity Radio, bagging interviews with famous people in return for advertising plugs, and tried to sell himself as a theatre and restaurant reviewer. He soon made enemies in the theatre world, says a director who started monitoring his online activities a few years ago, and who now wishes to remain anonymous. Belfield became known across theatres as someone who wanted to throw a tantrum if he didn't get the press tickets he wanted. He would harass some theatre companies to the extent that his email address was blocked and front of house staff were warned about him. Belfield had a complicated relationship with the entertainment industry, the director believes. He loved and hated show business. And if he couldn't be you, he'd have you and be part of you another way. If that way was via abuse, then that was certainly effective in being part of your story. He hated the thing he loved, or hated other people having success within it. The final two victims who went to court and testified against Belfield were both from the theatre world. Neither had ever met him. Ben Hewis is a videographer who works in the theatre and wedding industries, and Philip Dehaney was a rival theatre blogger. Both had come to the defence of others under attack by Belfield. Belfield soon became obsessed with ruining Hewis's professional and personal life. He took photos of Hewis's wife and young child from social media and included them in his videos, even using a picture of a fetal scan showing Hewis's unborn baby as part of his relentless email campaign of harassment. He also contacted Hewis's clients to undermine his business and encouraged his followers to join in with the abuse. Dehaney ended up the subject of numerous YouTube broadcasts where Belfield suggested he was mentally ill and called him a mincer and a little twirly with an incredibly tiny man sausage. Belfield also phoned Dehaney's mother and then threatened to broadcast the call. An outrageous and cruel act, said Judge Saini, and effectively sought to blackmail him by revealing details of a long-spent conviction. By the time Belfield began tormenting Dehaney in 2020, he had become a successful YouTuber who could have been earning up to £528,000, according to Social Blade, a website that monitors social media channels. That all stopped in February this year when YouTube suspended monetization on Belfield's Voice of Reason for violating its creator policy, after a negative article in the Times about high-earning conspiracy theorist. That prompted Belfield to set up his secret Voice of Reason channel, which streamed behind a paywall on his website. Launching it on the 1st of March this year, Belfield said he wanted to broadcast away from the toxic spectrumed trolls, lefties, fartheads, and Mogadon moronic medicated mentalists and journalists. How many people signed up for a £1 a week is unclear, though some live streams attracted barely 300 viewers. It was on that channel that he first broadcast highly partisan court reports from his own trial, later posted to YouTube and still available to view, after persuading the judge that he was a journalist and should be given the same rights as the Nottingham Post. That he was allowed to play court reporter upset many complainants, particularly as Belfield decided not to give evidence under oath. Some feel he was given too much power in his own trial. Whilst never submitting himself to cross-examination, he was allowed to deliver a pompous closing speech deriding the case as a BBC and police witch hunt and describing himself as the #1 anti-BBC journalist. I am offensive. My human right allows me to speak words that are not to everyone's taste, he told the jury. The judge did stop him from interrogating complainants, appointing David Aubrey as a proxy advocate, but when Aubrey caught COVID, Vine opted to be questioned by Belfield rather than delay a long-booked holiday and found himself being asked about the true meaning of the C word. While most defendants on trial try to avoid cameras on the way into court, Belfield seemed to be doing his best to attract them, wearing an array of wacky jackets and shirts. The day he was found guilty, he was wearing a Bermuda shirt and shorts. Instead of a lawyer, he was often accompanied by James Brandon, a member of the old-school comedy duo The Grumbleweeds. Fans, largely older women, were often in the public gallery to show support. How much money Belfield made in recent years is unclear. His last company, Champagne Sippers Incorporated in December 2020, has never filed company accounts. He bought his detached house in Mapley, Nottingham, for £314,950 in October 2018, and it is mortgaged. After his first arrest in June 2020, he started 2 crowdfunders to raise money to sue first the BBC and then Nottinghamshire Police. According to GoFundMe, which hosted the appeals, he raised a total of £29,446. Most of it had been withdrawn by Belfield by the time GoFundMe got around to banning him for inappropriate off-platform behaviour, with the exception of £5,260, which was refunded to donors. Even after YouTube stopped him making money from his channel, Belfield was still reasonably flush. He is being sued for libel by Vine, as well as by the Nottinghamshire police detective in charge of the case against him. And when ordered to pay Vine's initial costs of £26,000 after failing to file a defence on time, paid up in October 2021 within a few days. It was lockdown that offered Belfield an opportunity to make some proper money. Unable to work and claiming to be on £86 a week universal credit when the theatres shut, Belfield reinvented himself as a right-wing shock jock. At first, he grew his audience with silly sketches and phone-ins, railing against government COVID policy, particularly the ban on care home visits. Close Belfield watchers believe his lurch to the right was a business decision rather than an ideological one. The Belfield Green knew at Radio Leeds in 2010 was difficult, but he wasn't a table-thumping, immigrant-hating right-wing polemicist, she says. I don't think that stuff even bothered him. Barring a successful appeal, Belfield will serve at least the next 2 years and 39 weeks in jail before being released on licence to serve the second half of his sentence, but some of the complainants feel they never really got justice. For the best part of 10 years, they had been complaining about Belfield's vendetta in which he sent hundreds, if not thousands, of emails to them and their superiors. Sometimes these emails included what the judge said were highly offensive and personal comments about their physical appearance, including sexualised comments, as well as wholly false allegations that the women had bullied him. I accept the evidence Mr. Belfield effectively followed these women online, harassing them throughout their careers, said the judge. Liz Green says Belfield has destroyed her mental health and that she was so frightened that he or his followers would turn up at her house, she spent £20,000 on security measures. I live in fear and have done for a long time, she says. We were the learning curve for Belfield. He realised what he could do and did it with impunity. We were the warm-up act. That's an excerpt from an article published in The Guardian today. It's available on their website. There will be a link in the description for you to go and read the whole article if you wish. It is available in the public domain. I've seen it posted on Facebook. My name's Adrian Allen. Thank you for your likes, your subscriptions, but most of all your indulgence. Please hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next video.